In 10 months working with SingleStore, a Series F database company, I was able to generate 1,100 leads, cost of $50 per lead in a market where average cost per lead is $595. So in this video, what I'm going to do is I'm going to share 5 strategies with you that I use in order to make that happen. Be sure to stick around to the end because that is where I am going to share with you the most effective strategy of all 5. Hi y'all, welcome back to the strategy room where founders come to think, learn, plan, and improve growth. I'm Lillian Pierson. I'm a fractional CMO and GTM engineer for tech startups, mostly data and AI startups, as well as B2B SaaS. Like I said, today I'm going to be walking you through the 5 strategies that I use to help a Series F database company to drive 1,100 leads at $50 per lead in the software development market. We took them from scattered webinars to new users in the matter of just one engagement. Their SingleStore was when they brought me in. Look, they had incredible webinar content. The topics were perfect for their audiences. The quality was exceptional. They had amazing guests. But the thing is, they just weren't getting the traction that they needed with the webinar series. They needed a distribution engine. So that is what they brought me in to do. And what I did was I built a repeatable system that we could leverage to tap into that wider audience and bring them users and leads on a repeat basis. So before they brought me in, attendance was pretty inconsistent, and then lead volume was, of course, unpredictable. Also, they're in a market where leads cost $595 on average. So considering that they were running a PLG play, which means that they were trying to get trial users, $595 per lead just doesn't work. They had the content, they just didn't have the system and the distribution. Now, according to Marketing Prof's B2B webinar research benchmarks, 73% of B2B marketers are saying that webinars are still their number one source of lead. But the problem here is that most companies, while they might have the webinar piece, they do not have the piece which converts webinar to consistent leads and pipeline. So what I built for SingleStore was a repeatable distribution and conversion system. Okay, first looking at market-led content strategy. Before writing even a single line of content, I always started with research. So I analyzed conversations in X, Reddit, in Instagram, LinkedIn, and then of course with Google search. And then what I was looking to do is I was looking to understand what the SingleStore audience, what their interests were in relation to the topic of the webinar. So in many cases, SingleStore's webinars were for data professionals. So I needed to find a hook, something that was kind of viral and of interest to that audience that was directly relevant to the topic of the webinar. Because I rooted the promotional copy in facts and statistics that were of great interest to the audience for the webinar, then this came in as organic, native, and non-promotional. Because of course, no one wants to see an ad, but if you're presenting something that's of great interest to them, and then they see that they can click through to get more of that, they are much more likely to do that rather than like if you just run an ad and be like, yo, check this out, sign up. No one engages with that, right? So we need to find a way to develop content that pulls people in and addresses the pain point that they're actively trying to solve. You can identify the pain point through research, and that's what we do with the market-led content strategy. Okay, moving into the second strategy I used to drive leads for SingleStore, I did audience segmentation. So the thing about SingleStore is, yes, it was running a PLG play. It was trying to get free trial users for their databases and trying to get basically the grassroots level users. The main meat and potatoes for SingleStore is, of course, the enterprise customers. And so they needed to kind of segment these webinars to try and attract all types of audiences that supported their conversion. So their webinar series was targeted at each of these different segments within their ICP. Not all channels are equal, especially when you are marketing to technical audiences. So what I needed to do with the channel optimization is select the channels that I knew were going to have the best reach and engagements and conversions with the segment we're targeting, right? And so by and large, you're going to say, okay, yeah, you're trying to get a hold of data professionals, data leaders, and technical founders. So that's going to be LinkedIn, that's going to be X, that's going to be YouTube. And if you guess those, then you are right. But we also have email lists and blogs. So I brought those in as well because I owned that audience and those had some high leverage plays associated with them. So what I was really trying to do was get both short-term, like immediate signups for SingleStore, and then also long tail growth associated with SEO. So I brought in all of those channels. And so according to Metrical's 2026 LinkedIn survey, LinkedIn generates anywhere between 75 and 85% of all B2B leads that are generated from social media marketing platforms. So LinkedIn is definitely the B2B staple. But that being said, channel selection should always be grounded in data. So that is what I did when I selected the channels for the webinars. Once these channels were set, I built a coordinated campaign system that pushed them through all 5 channels at one time. But each channel, like I said, it has a specific role. So blog captured evergreen search demand and long tail signups. Then email converted my warm audiences with direct registration CTAs. Now, the emails were not just like, hey, come sign up for this webinar, because no one's going to do that. But the emails were actually informing, like, I did a lot of research on the content, what's going to be the best angle of most interest related to the webinar. So it was very meaty and educational. And I used the ADA framework. So we brought people in, we gave them something of value, and then we made them want to sign up for the webinar because the thing they just got was so valuable to them, right? So that's how I did the emails. Now, LinkedIn and X drove immediate brand awareness and signups straight from the platforms. Every asset shared one consistent campaign message, and of course it had the same CTA, which is to sign up for the webinar, but absolutely nothing was siloed. And each piece reinforced one another. So the system ran 2 to 4 webinar promotions per week. It was definitely repeatable, and it was a light lift. And the best thing of all for SingleStore is they didn't have to I didn't need support from anyone internally at SingleStore in order to drive leads for them on a consistent basis. All right, so before I share strategy 5, the big kahuna, the one that really got most of the leads for this engagement, let me explain what these first 4 foundational pillars that we just discussed, what they actually delivered together. Over 10 months, we promoted over 50 SingleStore webinars. Some of the posts on LinkedIn, they would hit over 125,000 impressions. And then, of course, the free trial signups for SingleStore increased, and their brand authority grew quite a bit in the developer market. So the average cost for SingleStore here was about $50, and then the cost per lead in development market, if you're running ads at that time, is actually $595. So you can see that's quite a delta. And so clearly, as you can see, having an organic distribution system built and operating is quite advantageous and definitely worth the investment. Webinars are still going strong and driving leads for B2B technology companies. But of course, the missing variable that most webinar strategies have is the distribution piece, which we're talking about here today. And so without further ado, strategy number 5, identity-based lead generation. This is the one that really drove the majority of signups. You could say it's the hook. It's the thing that commanded the most attention. But the other 4 strategies were the foundational strategies that basically captured that attention to drive growth both immediately and long-term for SingleStore. So what I did and like to do is use high status, curiosity-driven LinkedIn polls to attract people to vote in order to get that virality. And it triggers a micro commitment when someone on LinkedIn or someone on a platform, they vote on something, right? It then, of course, not only bumps the content up in the algorithm and gets more distribution, but it also is the first step. It's a micro commitment. And once one person takes one step, it's more likely they're going to take the next, right? So what I would do is, instead of just promoting the webinar directly, I would ask questions that made the audience self-identify. You can see here's a screenshot of one of the posts that I did where we're actually a poll. We're talking about Netflix paying product managers and how much salary they could generate. See, it generated over 1,000 votes, but it doesn't really look like a webinar promotion. It's talking about how much you can get paid if you are an AI product manager. And then notice the answer in the caption. That serves the purpose of getting people to click on the actual post in order to get the answer right away. So that will then bump up the poll in the algorithm. Who doesn't want to make $1,200,000 per year as an employee? So what does that have to do with a webinar from SingleStore? Well, if you join the webinar for SingleStore, you're going to learn to build a full stack AI product with Vercel, Next.js, and GPT. That's what it has to do with how much AI product managers are making. So this is basically the way you have to think about it. It's like hooking people in on the thing they're interested in and showing them directly how it is associated with the action that you want them to take. And then, of course, I put the answer in the captions so that the person would have to click through in order to get it, and then that would bump it up in the algorithm. That's basically how it works. It's not complicated, but you do need to be strategic, and you do need to have those other pieces in place to really make this work. So one of the things I found after experimenting with a lot of these is that people engage with questions that are related to who they want to become, aspirational questions. So if I could find the right aspirational question and compelling factoid that was directly to the actual event topic, then we were pretty golden. So yeah, just recap. A direct promotion is like, here's this thing, sign up for it, right? No one really cares, no one's interested, right? But a poll creates engagement, the comments build community, and then the follow-up is creating conversion. Because now the prospect has self-identified with their own ambition. And then the webinar feels like a natural next step and definitely not an ad. That's actually the use of polls are up 55% year over year. But B2B marketers are using polls for lead qualification and audience segmentation, which I thought was a bit interesting that they hadn't really caught on to the fact that you can actually use it for directly driving for lead generation. And there you have it. You have my most powerful strategy for taking organic LinkedIn and converting it to leads pretty much overnight with zero ad spend. But here's the truth. If you have webinars, demos, other types of thought leadership you're already working on and building for your brand, but you're not distributing that with a repeatable distribution system that is basically self-learning and growing to improve results on every loop, or at least on a reoccurring basis, then you are leaving a crap ton of money on the table. You definitely do not need more content, but it's highly likely that you do need a system to make that content perform better for your brand in terms of leads and sales. I do have a free growth engine audit and gap map over on my website. And in about 5 or 10 minutes, you'll discover the stage of your funnel is leaking the most leads, where your highest leverage opportunities are hiding, what's breaking between awareness and conversion, and what is in order to generate leads faster. Here we are at the end. So you have learned exactly how I took SingleStore from scattered webinar content to 1,100 leads at $50 per lead in 10 months with 0 paid ads, 5 strategies, 1 repeatable system, and completely organic. Now, if you want me to create a separate video as a deep dive in any of the 5 strategies I discussed in this video, then just leave a comment and let me know, and then I'll get that in my pipeline. Each week, I bring you practical growth strategies that you can use to build predictable, reliable pipeline for your tech startup. If that sounds valuable, then I invite you to subscribe and hit the bell icon below to be notified when my next video drops.